What's going on, guys? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a comparison between the Cricut Dream 5G and the Umidigi Power 5. Now before we go any further, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. But with that being said, let's get into the video. So the Cricut Dream 5G has a 6.82-inch LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 263, and an aspect ratio of 20.5:9. The Umidigi Power 5 has a 6.53-inch LCD display as well, with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 160, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. So pretty much everything about these phones' displays is the same, except the Cricut Dream 5G has a much larger display, so that does give it a pretty big advantage. So if you're streaming videos, playing a game, viewing photos, even reading, it's all going to be better on the Cricut Dream 5G because the display is larger. And not only is it larger, but we're also getting a slightly taller form factor with an aspect ratio of 20.5:9 versus 20:9, and that is going to make a little bit of a difference. It's going to be slightly taller, so when you're scrolling through a feed, maybe you're reading something, you're going to be able to see everything a lot better on the screen without having to scroll as much. And even when you're watching videos like this, it's going to have a more cinematic look. Both of these phones have water drop notch front-facing cameras that look pretty much exactly the same. The Cricut Dream 5G's camera is 13 megapixels, and the Umidigi Power 5's camera is 8 megapixels. So not too bad here with either of them. Now for storage, the Cricut Dream 5G has 64 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and the Umidigi Power 5 has 128 gigabytes with microSD card expansion as well. So neither of these phones have a bad amount of storage, but I would say the Umidigi Power 5 is going to be better for power users if you're planning on having a bunch of apps, lots of photos and videos, that sort of stuff, because it has so much more storage. And honestly, even if you're not a power user, if you think you might have more than average as far as data goes on your phone, you might want to consider going with the Umidigi Power 5, because in this day and age, having double the storage never hurts. Now, one interesting thing about the Cricut Dream 5G is it actually has wireless charging, and the Umidigi Power 5 does not. Now, this isn't a huge game changer or anything. This feature is more of a convenience to have rather than something that people actively seek out. But if you do like wireless charging, the Cricut Dream 5G is going to have an advantage because it actually has this feature, whereas the Umidigi Power 5 obviously doesn't. Now, for security options, the Cricut Dream 5G has a fingerprint scanner right here on the back, but there's no face unlock. And the Umidigi Power 5 has a fingerprint scanner right here in the power key. And this phone actually does have face unlock. So I would say the Umidigi Power 5 has an advantage due to having two options versus the Cricut Dream 5G that only has the fingerprint scanner and no face unlock. Starting with the Cricut Dream 5G, we're going to give these fingerprint scanners a try and see how well they work. There we go, one more time. And there we go, real fast. Moving on to the Umidigi Power 5. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see there, both of these fingerprint scanners are really fast and responsive. No issues there. Now taking a look at the rear camera setups, we got a quad camera setup with the Cricut Dream 5G with a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera for portrait mode. For video, this phone has a max shooting quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so no 4K or anything, but that's not really that big a deal, because it's the same for the Umidigi Power 5 anyway. Now with the Umidigi Power 5, we got a triple camera setup with a 16 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 5 megapixel macro camera. Now one thing to keep in mind about the Umidigi Power 5 is the lack of a depth sensing camera. Because of this, even though this phone technically has a portrait mode, it really doesn't work. So if you want to get those nice blurred out backgrounds, I would go with the Cricut Dream 5G because this phone can actually take real good pictures in portrait mode with nice blurred out backgrounds. And the Umidigi Power 5, again, even though it technically has the mode, it doesn't really work. Overall, I would apply that same concept to pretty much every camera feature on these phones. The Umidigi Power 5 doesn't take bad photos per se, but in comparison to the Cricut Dream 5G, I definitely would say the Cricket Dream 5G does take better photos. The Umidigi Power 5 is going to be okay if you're just taking a few photos to send to friends or something like that. But if you want to take photos that you're actually going to keep, maybe for social media, or actually something professional, again, the Cricket Dream 5G is going to be so much better. Internally, the Cricket Dream 5G is getting 4 gigabytes of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor. And the Umidigi Power 5 is also getting 4 gigabytes of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G25 processor. I ran Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both of these phones, and the Cricket Dream 5G came back with a single core score of 545 and a multi-core score of 1666. And the Umidigi Power 5 came back with a single core score of 145 and a multi-core score of 857. So there's a huge difference here. The Cricket Dream 5G is basically twice as powerful as the Umidigi Power 5, and that is a huge difference. While the Umidigi Power 5 is going to be okay for everyday tasks, like sending text messages, making calls, browsing the web, maybe a little bit of social media use, the Cricket Dream 5G is going to be able to do pretty much everything. Now, it's not exactly flagship level, I wouldn't say that, but at the same time, there's really not a whole lot this phone can't do. So if you want to play more high-end games like Fortnite, or if you just want to go on social media a lot, if you're on your phone constantly, I would say the Cricket Dream 5G is going to have a huge advantage because this phone not only is going to be able to do more than the Umidigi Power 5, but it's also going to be so much faster. Now, in addition to that, as the name implies, the Cricket Dream 5G is of course a 5G phone, whereas the Umidigi Power 5 is not. So if you do want 5G on your phone, the Cricket Dream 5G is obviously going to be the way to go. Now for the battery here, the Umidigi Power 5 has a huge advantage with a 6,150 mAh battery that supports 10 watt fast charging versus the Cricket Dream 5G that only has a 4,750 mAh battery. The Cricket Dream 5G's battery also doesn't support fast charging, so overall, I would give it to the Umidigi Power 5 in terms of battery, since the battery itself is not only so much bigger, but it also supports fast charging. So if you're in a situation where you need to charge your phone up a little faster, you'll actually be able to do that with this phone. Now, neither of them have a bad battery per se, but the Umidigi Power 5 has an abnormally huge battery versus a pretty average battery with the Cricket Dream 5G. Now, on the flip side, one thing the Cricket Dream 5G has that the Umidigi Power 5 doesn't is NFC. In case you don't know what it is, NFC is the technology behind contactless mobile payment services like Google Pay, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, all that. So without NFC, you can't use that feature, but luckily the Cricket Dream 5G does have it, so you can use Google Pay, whereas with the Umidigi Power 5, you can't. Now, one thing the Umidigi Power 5 does have that's pretty cool that the Cricket Dream 5G doesn't is a smart key. The smart key is basically a button you can use for a bunch of different shortcuts, and you can actually set those shortcuts to pretty much whatever you want in the phone's settings menu. Overall, I don't think that feature is really a game changer, but at the same time, it is a cool thing to have that most phones don't. So in conclusion, which of these phones is better? I would say overall, despite them being in pretty much the same price range, the Cricket Dream 5G is significantly better than the Umidigi Power 5. The Cricket Dream 5G, first of all, has a much larger display that's going to be better for content consumption and just generally doing anything on the phone. Now, usually having a larger display means the phone is also going to be a little bit uncomfortable to hold, but with this phone, it has such a sleek, modern design that you don't really even notice it being larger. Also, despite these phones looking pretty much the same, I do think the Cricket Dream 5G has much better build quality. It feels a lot more solid, whereas there are parts of the Umidigi Power 5 that feel a little flimsy, like the buttons for example, and the phone itself just feels a little light. The Cricket Dream 5G also has a much more powerful processor, a better camera setup, and NFC. On the other hand, the Umidigi Power 5 does have its advantages. It has a lot more storage, in fact, double the storage of the Cricket Dream 5G, and it has Face Unlock, and it has a much larger battery that supports fast charging. So overall, neither of these phones are really bad, but at the same time, I do think for the price, the Cricket Dream 5G does have quite a bit more to offer. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and as always, I will see you in the next video.